Canada too. I see news about violence in the environmental movement. Look at these stories. Surprisingly, this one is from the CBC. Take a look. When anarchists attack, how police say a peaceful Indigenous-led protest over a BC pipeline was hijacked by violent outsiders. Let me read a chunk of it to you. I'm surprised that Trudeau's CBC state broadcaster published this at all. There are some flaws with it, but it's interesting. Let me read a bit. A security guard was swarmed in a truck near a worksite by a group of people in masks and camouflage firing flare guns. He was then forced to flee into the dead of night while the assailants escaped. When the RCMP released those details last week about a recent incident along the Coastal GasLink pipeline project near Houston, BC, they could have copied and pasted them from a news release they issued more than a year ago. But that's where the comparison ends, because while the incident on March 26 resulted in the alleged theft of a chainsaw and some unrelated arrests, what happened at the worksite on February 17, 2022 was far more dangerous and destructive. During that attack, assailants swung axes into the side of security trucks. A police officer was injured in a booby trap, and tens of millions of dollars in damage was done. But more than a year later, not a single suspect has been taken into custody. Wow. Not a word from Justin Trudeau or Marco Mendicino or Chrystia Freeland on any of this. They put the country under martial law. They seized bank accounts. They deployed riot horses because of some horn-honking truckers who had parked illegally. But not a peep about this from them. Have you heard anything about this from them? I wonder if it's because a Greenpeace criminal named Stephen Guilbeault is in the same federal cabinet. He committed a crime at the CN Tower. We know that. And much more scary, he committed a home invasion crime, terrifying the wife of then Alberta Premier Ralph Klein. His wife was home by herself, and imagine these people storming the house, climbing on the roof. I wonder if Stephen Guilbeault was in the cabinet, lobbying behind the scenes to protect these eco-terrorists. They're his friends, I'm sure. But here's where the CBC reverts to its form and lies. Or maybe it's Trudeau's RCMP that's lying, or maybe both. Let me quote. According to the Mountie in charge of the investigation, a local group of peaceful protesters with environmental and Indigenous land rights concerns was infiltrated by outsiders with a different agenda. Quote, we saw a number of people come into the protest camps that had been involved in previous protests elsewhere in the country, elsewhere in North America, that had a propensity to cause violence. Chief Superintendent John Brewer told the CBC News. Okay, so far so good. Brewer described the outsiders as anarchists. Okay. A small group of people who aren't necessarily tied to each other, but subscribe to an ideology aimed at causing chaos. Okay. But here's where it gets weird. In Brewer's words, targeting government facilities, government agencies, infrastructure. Hang on. What government facilities, agencies, infrastructure? It's a natural gas pipeline. Trucks and security guards, they work for a private company. What is this weird Trudeau cop talking about? He's hiding their agenda. Really, their agenda is anti-fossil fuel. Why, that just happens to be Trudeau's agenda now, doesn't it?
It is a fundamental responsibility of any Canadian Prime Minister, and it's a historical responsibility, to get our resources to market. We are a country of resources, and we need to get those to market. But in the 21st century, getting our resources to market needs to be done not just by diktat, but by doing it responsibly, sustainably, and including people in the process, both on consultations, including science, including Indigenous communities, in the way we move forward. I've said time and time again, and you're all tired of hearing me say it, you can't make a choice between what's good for the environment and what's good for the economy. We can't shut down the oil sands tomorrow. We need to phase them out. We need to manage the transition off of our dependence on fossil fuels. That is going to take time, and in the meantime, we have to manage that transition.
So we have a violent group of environmental activists that is engaging in eco-terrorism, and not a peep from Trudeau. Then again, he didn't speak out against the burning and the vandalism, the violent attacks on Canadian churches either, did he? Even though about 50 of them were hit. It's a strange news story in the CBC. Look at this part. CBC News pulled the court documents to detail every arrest related to the pipeline injunction since 2018 and then cross-referenced those names with other sources. We found roughly 70% of the people taken into custody were not from the area. Some were from other parts of BC, some from other provinces, and 2 were from the U.S. By the way, this is literally what Trudeau accused the trucker convoy of being: outside influences, even foreign influences, and of course, who is paying for all this? Look, in northern BC, these aren't just ordinary hippies. They sound like genuine eco-terrorists. Let me read some more. When RCMP arrived at the crime scene, some attackers were still there, and police gave chase on foot. But when an officer was injured after stepping on a board with nails driven through it, what Brewer calls a man trap, the pursuit was called off over safety concerns. The attackers then used snowmobiles and the path that had been cleared for the pipeline, which runs parallel to the access road, to make their getaway. While officers were still at the site assessing the threat and securing the scene, the attackers had ditched their snowmobiles at a nearby protest camp to meet up with waiting vehicles. They then drove down the access road until they reached the Yellowhead Highway and disappeared into the night. According to Brewer, investigators believed the attack and the escape had been rehearsed. Brewer called the latter one of the most complex situations he's ever dealt with. It was planned, it was practiced, and carried out in a very methodical manner, he said. It was all against oil and gas companies. Actually, not oil, just gas. Natural gas, that's the clean-burning, cheap, plentiful source of energy. I wonder who is paying for and organizing and training these terrorists. Is it OPEC? Is it Russia? They're the people who would benefit from stopping Canadian natural gas. I mean, they're the people who make natural gas now, Saudi Arabia, Qatar. They don't want Canadian energy in the world market. No curiosity about that in this CBC story. They call them anarchists. Really? Anarchists who seem pretty organized, who just happen to have the resources and skills to mount a years-long eco-terrorist attack on a Canadian private sector energy project. But really, how different are they than Trudeau or Guilbeault? That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.